Hi, I'm Elissa Welle. I study biomedical engineering, and I'm here today to talk to you about brain-machine interfaces. There are 6 million people living with paralysis in the US today. Some people were born with paralysis. Some people were paralyzed by a disease. And some people were paralyzed from an accident that damaged their spinal cord, perhaps from a car crash or a bullet wound. In fact, every year, there are almost 18,000 new patients who are paralyzed from a spinal cord injury in the US alone. It's a huge problem that affects a lot of people. The goal of a brain-machine interface is to help those who are paralyzed regain mobility and independence by controlling an external robotic hand using their thoughts. A brain-machine interface has 3 main parts. The first part listens in on what the cells in the brain are saying to each other, and then tells the computer what it heard. This part is sort of like eavesdropping on a conversation that's happening between 2 cells in the brain. The second part involves a computer, deciphering what the brain cells are saying to each other and trying to figure out what the brain actually wants to do. This part acts as a translator between thoughts and actions. The computer learns about the conversation going on in the brain and then decides what actions the brain actually wants to do. The third and final part is the external robotic device. In my research, that external robotic device is a hand. The computer tells the robotic hand how to move, and if it all works well, the robotic hand does exactly what the brain is thinking. So these 3 parts make one brain-machine interface. This might sound like distant sci-fi, but actually it's a device that already exists today. Check out this video of a patient named Kathy in 2012 sipping on some coffee using her brain-machine interface. The whole point of a brain-machine interface is to try to help people who've lost movement in their limbs. Their brain is trying to tell their body what to do, but their body can't move. So if we can figure out what the brain is trying to do, like pick up a cup of coffee, then we can tell a robotic hand to do it instead. But there's a problem. Right now, the devices that we use to eavesdrop on what the cells in the brain are saying to each other, it's called an electrode. And right now, those electrodes are just way too big. Like, they're actually 4 times bigger than the size of the brain cells that they're trying to listen to. It's like having a cell phone the size of a car in your living room, and you're trying to make a phone call with that. It's just too big. We need something smaller. And that's what I study. I study tiny electrodes for the brain made of these really thin wires made of carbon. Now, carbon is an element. It's found in a lot of things, in molecules, in food, in cells in our body. It's also found in condensed forms in diamonds, pencil lead, or charcoal. In the lab, you can make these really thin wires of carbon. Actually, I have some here. Oh, here we go. This right here, this has 6,000 carbon fibers, individual fibers inside here. So I study how single carbon fibers can be used as electrodes in the brain. Now, what's cool about carbon fibers is that they're also used in a lot of composite materials. So things that need to be both lightweight but really strong, like sporting equipment, or even airplane wings. They use carbon fibers too. So it turns out that these tiny carbon fibers have something else cool about them too. They can detect electrical signals in the brain and transmit it to a computer. Remember before when I talked about how the brain cells like to talk to each other? How they talk to each other is through electrical signals. And the brain sends the commands to our muscles, to the rest of our body, using these electrical signals. So we want to detect these electrical signals using an electrode. These guys. Not only are the carbon fibers strong and useful for detecting the signals in the brain, but they're also tiny. The diameter of each carbon fiber is half that of a neuron. So carbon fiber electrodes sit right next to neurons and listen in on what they're saying. Imagine you're trying to hear a conversation between 2 people that are sitting inside a huge stadium. I mean, you'd really have to be right next to them to hear what they're saying. And that's what carbon fiber electrodes can do. By being small, they also don't cause damage to the brain. I mean, imagine trying to park your car in your living room. You'd have to break down a wall or 2 to do that. But a carbon fiber can just walk right through the front door. Carbon fiber electrodes, however, are not perfect. and I study how to modify them to maximize the number of brain cells that they can individually record from. To make these carbon fiber electrodes, we have to use a lot of tools. Originally, the final tool that we would use in the process would be a pair of scissors. It turns out that wasn't the best tool. So what I've done is use new tools, like a laser or a blowtorch, to create a better electrode at the end of the carbon fiber. The original electrodes made with scissors were irregular and inconsistent, but with lasering and blowtorching, I've created an electrode that's much more stable and consistent. And actually, they're more effective now in detecting the electrical signals in the brain than before. When these new laser cut electrodes are put into the brain, after 7 days, they're recording almost 2.6 times more brain signals than our old electrodes. And not only that, but the brain signals that we record are clearer and better information than they used to be. It's a big improvement. Plus, the electrodes made with the blowtorch are pointy and sharp, and it makes it easier to record from other parts of the nervous system, like nerves, with these really sharp and pointy electrodes. Perhaps one day, we can use these sharp, pointy carbon fiber electrodes to record from nerves and create a nerve-machine interface. That could be a big help to patients who are not paralyzed but have an amputation. They don't really need a brain-machine interface, but a nerve-machine interface could make their prosthetic limb a lot easier to control. In any case, with our newly modified carbon fiber electrodes, we can record from a lot of brain cells without causing much damage. And as a part of a brain-machine interface, these new carbon fiber electrodes will make it a lot easier for that patient to reach for the cup of coffee.